Professor Marston was fascinated by sorority initiation rituals. He wrote, "In the spring of the freshman year, the sophomore girls held what was called the baby party, which all freshman girls were compelled to attend. At this affair, the freshman girls were questioned as to their misdemeanors and punished for their disobedience and rebellions. The baby party was so named because the freshman girls were required to dress as babies. Here we have educated, adult women made to adopt the ultimate submissive guise, that of helpless babies. By all accounts, many submissive men, including senior judges, also love to posture as helpless babies." Marston went on, "At the party, the freshman girls were put through various stunts under command of sophomores. Upon one occasion, for instance, the freshman girls were led into a dark corridor where their eyes were blindfolded and their arms were bound behind them. Only one freshman at a time was taken through this corridor, along which sophomore guards were stationed at intervals. This arrangement was designed to impress the girls punished with the impossibility of escape from their captresses. Initiation rituals are always based on BDSM ideas. The initiate is always placed in the position of a submissive, about to be dominated by the adepts. Humiliation is frequently practiced in BDSM." Marston wrote, "After a series of harmless punishments, each girl was led into a large room where all the junior and senior girls were assembled. There she was sentenced to go through various exhibitions, supposed to be especially suitable to punish each particular girl's failure to submit to discipline imposed by the upper-class girl. The sophomore girls carried long sticks with which to enforce, if necessary, the stunts which the freshmen were required to perform. This is a typical BDSM scenario: punishment and discipline. Submissives are typically given the cane by the dominant." Marston wrote, "While the program did not call for a series of prearranged physical struggles between individual girls, frequent rebellion of the freshmen against the commands of their captresses and guards furnished the most exciting portion of the entertainment, according to the report of a majority of the class girls. The submissive often has to rebel in order to warrant more intense punishment and discipline. The dominant must enforce obedience." Marston wrote, "Nearly all the sophomores reported excited pleasantness of captivation emotion throughout the party. The pleasantness of captivation response appeared to increase when they were obliged to overcome rebellious freshmen physically, or to perform the actions from which the captive girls strove to escape. So, the sophomores were turned on by having to enforce the captive condition of the freshmen. They enjoyed exercising physical dominance at close, intimate quarters." Marston wrote, "From these studies of girls' reactions, it seemed evident that the strongest and most pleasant captivation emotion was experienced during a struggle with girls who were trying to escape from their captivity. In other words, women get turned on wrestling with other women." Who knew? Wonder Woman, as envisaged by Marston, often engaged in tussles with other women, equally scantily clad. Marston designed Wonder Woman as the perfect combination of all four of the disc personality styles. Marston said, "Frankly, Wonder Woman is psychological propaganda for the new type of woman who, I believe, should rule the world. Sadly, today's version of Wonder Woman is a woke bore, a vanilla feminist." Marston believed that masculine comic books were so violent because they reflected an overabundance of the dominant, or D-style, personality trait. Wonder Woman toned down the violence because she instead used all four personality styles. Modern action movies and shoot-'em-up video games continue the tradition of male violence expressing pure dominance and forced compliance. 50 Shades of Grey is ostensibly about domination and submission, but is actually more about inducement and submission. The sadistic work of the Marquis de Sade was all about violent sexual domination and compliance. De Sade had no interest in whether his victims liked what he was doing to them, and, in fact, the opposite was mostly true. He wanted them to truly suffer, hence sadism. This world is a disc world. Most things are done by dominants and inducers. They are the active force in the world. Marston had a deep appreciation of pin-up and bondage aesthetics, which is why Wonder Woman looked and behaved the way she did. She has now been airbrushed by the woke. Wonder Woman was often bound in chains and ropes and had to find a way to escape. It's extraordinary that the original Wonder Woman was a BDSM heroine and the cartoon strip was forever playing on BDSM themes. Bring back the original, we say. Wonder Woman these days is a snore fest. And isn't it time for a comic strip based on Manic Menad? Let's have a Dionysian comic. Marston was strongly interested in what he called captivation emotion. This concerned the feelings generated by sexual captivity, whether in those suffering it or those inflicting it. Submissives are routinely placed in situations of captivity, constraint, and restraint. Wonder Woman herself was frequently subjected to captivation emotion. Isn't it time to bring back the authentic Wonder Woman, the Marston version exploring disc? Let's have BDSM/disc Wonder Woman. Get rid of that vile woke creature now masquerading as Wonder Woman. Marston created not only Wonder Woman but also the lie detector test, polygraph, which began as an exploration of the relationship between blood pressure and emotion. Wonder Woman herself had a lasso of truth, a rope which forced people to tell the truth when tied up. That was her BDSM version of the polygraph. BDSM is where people reveal their core secrets. Your Pornhub search history says more about your deep nature than anything else. More or less everyone is on the BDSM spectrum, whether they acknowledge it or not. Marston wrote, female behavior also contains still more evidence than male behavior that captivation emotion is not limited to intersex relationships. The person of another girl seems to evoke from female subjects, under appropriate circumstances, fully as strong captivation response as does that of a male. Typically, a dominant male loves physically subduing a submissive female. A heterosexual male, if involved with another male, will normally be engaged in a violent and dangerous fight with that person rather than anything remotely erotic. According to Marston, females are much more likely to find subduing a member of the same sex erotically exciting. Marston was interested in active love. He wrote, but pure active love requires, for its pleasure, the pleasure of its captive. Active love requires that the person be a willing, wholly submissive captive. The result can be accomplished only when the captor or captress makes himself or herself so utterly attractive to the stimulus person that the captured one submits voluntarily to the attraction exercised over him or her. Active love, according to this analysis, must be defined as capturing a loved person by the power of personal attraction. The term which most nearly conveys the meaning seems to be captivation. Captivation means making captive by charm, which offers a very fair characterization of pure active love emotion. We may, therefore, adopt the term captivation as a verbal symbol for active love emotion. Captivation emotion most frequently occurs in everyday life between members of opposite sexes. Nearly all normal girls or boys experience a considerable amount of captivation emotion during a playful physical struggle with an attractive member of the opposite sex. Still more frequently, captivation emotion is experienced in emotional or even intellectual struggles of the same sort. Such contests are not for the purpose of domination of the opponent as one desires to dominate an inanimate object. You can now understand why many boys and girls secretly like country dancing, a ritualized physical contact and struggle with a member of the opposite sex, imposed on school children. Marston wrote, the issue of the struggle is intended to decide only who shall induce and who shall submit. This is reminiscent of Hegel's master-slave dialectic, where a struggle takes place to decide who is master and who is slave. In Marston's system, the inducer will be the more intelligent, willful and captivating, and they will make a captive of the other. The other, who will often be the more beautiful one, hence more captivating in that respect, will relish their submission to the greater power. Marston, beguiled by BDSM, had a fascination with captivity and its role in sex and love. He wrote, in the emotional consciousness of males engaged in tormenting another, this active love element clearly assumes the characteristic of pleasure in enslaving, making captive, the stimulus person. So, Marston believed that while women got sexual pleasure from making other women captive, men got power pleasure from making other men captive, not sexual pleasure, but something analogous to it. With BDSM, the dominant derives both power and sexual pleasure from making the submissive captive, but they also desire that the submissive enjoys being captive, meaning that they have cast the ultimate spell over them. Marston wrote, it must be remembered that the male emotion, just considered, contains a controlling admixture of dominance. The violence and antagonistic quality of its delight in forcing another person into captivity and subjection, therefore, must be discounted before the true quality of active love emotion can be disclosed. When the dominance is abstracted, and pure active love alone remains, we find still the delight in capturing the weaker, stimulus person. Marston maintained that pure active love required the pleasure of its captive. Plainly, that pleasure is absent when men violently capture other men. The latter fear for their lives. No love is involved. In this case, pure power is the name of the game. Marston wrote, undoubtedly, both men and women love, and women, at least, love one another in exactly the same way as they love males. Therefore, love emotion cannot be regarded as a physical difference between male and female, nor can it be supposed to depend for its existence upon the existence of sex differences. The identification of love emotion with sex is responsible, in a large degree, for the social taboos which Occidental civilizations place on love. To regard love as an emotion the expression of which is facilitated by sex differences of body structure is wholesome. But to identify love emotion with sex characteristics in general, especially those of the male, leads to a most unfortunate lack of understanding of love, since the male sex is characterized chiefly by a preponderance of appetite. It also leads to a confusion of sex differences in love, with sex differences in appetite. Women are always depicted in terms of love, and men in terms of lust. It's so rare to encounter any idea of loving men, or lustful women. That's not how the mainstream narrative goes. Bound. Do you like to be blindfolded when you are placed in handcuffs? Do you love being gagged? Where would you like this conversation to go? Are you the transgressive type, or is it essential to stay in your comfort zone? Who is the big bad wolf? Is that the creature you dream of? Confess or suffer the consequences.